सो वी डिड क्वेश्चन नंबर 2. अब आते हैं वापस अपने क्वेश्चन नंबर 3 पर. जस्ट बिकॉज अगेन दिस इज द बिगनिंग ऑफ द क्लास. ये जो मटेरियल है this will be uploaded on the app which is there. From there you can take it, and I'm working very hard to prepare this material. अभी देखोगे how many good diagrams, ये जितने diagrams मैं दूंगा, जो case studies दूंगा, what you have to do, you have to integrate it into your writings. ठीक है? They should be reproduced in the examination, and these don't exist because many of them are my brain child. जो मैं प्रॉम्प्ट देता हूँ एआई को और वो फिर मेरे को बना करके देता है. सो दे डोंट एग्जिस्ट इन एनी बुक और एनी फॉर्म. ठीक है? लाइक फॉर एग्जाम्पल आई शो यू हाउ देर इज क्लाइमेट क्राइसिस से डिक्लाइनिंग कैपेसिटी. ये मैंने उसको हाथ से बना करके दिया और बोला कि उसको स्मूथ कर दो, साफ कर दो, तो उसने वो करके दिया. सेम वे अनदर डायग्राम हाउ पेंडेमिक्स से किस तरह का चेक होता है. ठीक है? how migration will ultimately affect. So again, can you understand? This is some handwritten. I had some already handwritten answers, so मैंने उसको बोला कि इसको साफ सुथरा बना करके दे दो. So it has done that. Okay, so you'll get lots of like. अब इस डायग्राम को मैंने खुद से बनाया और फिर उसको बोला कि you make it, where I am trying to show relationship between DTT and Rostow model. Okay, so all these things should become what? Part of your answer writing. अभी इतना frustrating है मेरे लिए कॉपीज को चेक करना. You cannot imagine those people I'm talking about who are going to write mains. उनकी कॉपीज में चेक कर रहा हूं. एक कॉमन जो कमेंट है वो ये है, why very few diagrams and maps and hardly any maps are there. अभी मैं सोच रहा था कि एक वो मोहर बनाने वाले होते हैं ना, उनके पास जाकर के वो लिखवा लेता हूं ऐसे, क्योंकि सब में ही करना पड़ रहा है. सो अगेन, if you don't understand this point, geography's language is through diagrams and maps. So if you are not following that, your marks will be on the lower side. We have to understand this point. Okay, so next question पर आते हैं. Examine the concept of optimum population and its limitations as a tool for population policy. ठीक है? So third category of type जो इसमें आ सकता है वो क्या है? Applied aspect. जैसे अभी सेकंड में हमने देखा था क्लाइमेट चेंज से लिंक किया था. Here it is applied aspect. So again the question is, examine the concept of optimum population and its limitation as a tool of population policy. इसमें देखते हैं, it will be bigger. So this is the question. Examine the concept of optimum population and its limitations as a tool of population policy. So your time starts now. जिसने ये 2 मिनट सही से यूज करना सीख लिया, ठीक है, वो बहुत अच्छी आंसर राइटिंग सीख जाएगा. By the time, the target is that by the time we reach to the end of our course, this time should reduce to 30 seconds. So the question is saying, examine the concept of optimum population and its limitation as a tool for population policy. Now first very important thing is, I'll tell you something and you will just raise hand how many of you thought like this. ठीक है? So सबसे पहली चीज है, I can see that there are two primary keywords, two different primary keywords. That means a question has two parts: concept of optimum population and second, limitations as a tool of पॉपुलेशन पॉलिसी, देयर आर टू पार्ट्स, ठीक है। इसका मतलब बहुत क्लियर है। और एक और चीज, कैन यू सी दैट फॉर ईच ऑफ दिस पार्ट देयर इज ओनली वन कीवर्ड, it is sharing the keyword for both the parts. It is a 15 marker, that means I'll be getting around 3 pages to write, somewhere around 225 marks, ठीक है। यानी कि 100 marks for first and 100 marks for the second part, something like this it will be the division of words which should be there, ठीक है। एक और बात हमने देखा कि examine is a category 3 keyword, इसका मतलब एक्सप्लेनेशन प्लस फॉर लिखना 70% एंड 30% शुड बी एटलीस्ट व्हाट, द क्रिटिसिज्म पार्ट, ठीक है। जो भी ये चारों मतलब यानी कि मेन बॉडी में मेरे 4 एलिमेंट्स होंगे, ठीक है। आई विल बी टॉकिंग अबाउट द कंसेप्ट एंड एग्जामिनेशन पार्ट ऑफ दैट कंसेप्ट, ठीक है। सेम वे लिमिटेशंस एंड उसका भी एग्जामिनेशन। I hope you get this point. So जिसने ये चारों पार्ट लिखे होंगे that person will be getting good marks and others will not get. How many of you thought about writing all the 4? ठीक है, उसके बाद हम पेजेस भर देंगे और फिर उसके बाद बाहर निकल के आएंगे और कहेंगे कि ज्योग्राफी में नंबर नहीं आते। दिस इज व्हाट इज हैपनिंग। हाँ, ठीक है, मतलब अगर तुम इस तरह से लिखते हो तो इट इज फाइन, आई वुड से कि दैट इज ऑल्सो अ वे टू राइट। अभी देखते हैं, मैंने क्योंकि आंसर इसको लिखा है प्रॉपर, तो यू विल सी कि वाई आई एम सेइंग 4 पार्ट। आई एम नॉट सेइंग अगर सपोज कोई 3 पार्ट में लिखता है तो आई विल डेफिनेटली गिव गुड मार्क्स टू दैट पर्सन, बट अगर कोई 4 पार्ट में लिखता है तो मैं उसको और अच्छे नंबर दूंगा। दिस इज द डिफरेंस, ओके। So 3 parts is also fine, no problem in that. So concept of optimum population. Now, can I say that one of the best way is to start with, because it is talking about the concept को examine करना है, तो best in such type of questions best is to start with the definition, ठीक है। So here in the introduction what I have done, I have started with the definition. So you can see optimum population, ये भी एक आदत बना लेते हैं कि द राइटर्स थिंकर्स अगर मुझे उनके बारे में लिखना है तो आई कैन राइट देम इन ब्रैकेट अराउंड दैट आइडिया। सो ऑप्टिमम पॉपुलेशन किसने दिया था? अभी हमने देखा था कैनन इन 1924, अदर्स हैड मेड इट पॉपुलर, इज द साइज एट विच पर कैपिटा रियल इनकम is maximized given a country's resources, technology and capital, ठीक है। It is anchored in the Ricardo's law of diminishing return. It is part and parcel. It takes into account that law of diminishing returns. This was the diagram. This is a very good diagram which shows that this kind of, what is the kind of condition which is existing. So there is per capita real income. This is the population. So there is a point O where it becomes high. Before that there is underpopulation. When there is underpopulation, increase in population will lead to what? It will lead to rising returns. If there is more increase in population, there will be rising returns. ठीक है? That means what will happen with the per capita real income? It will also keeps on increasing. But you know the theory of law of diminishing returns, there is a threshold, critical point beyond which what will happen, there will be decline taking place, ठीक है। So there is that point is referred to as what? The optimum population. Beyond that there will be decline, and that is the condition which we call it as overpopulation, where the diminishing returns set in, ठीक है। सो डायग्राम में बता दिया, इंट्रोडक्शन में डेफिनेशन लिख दिया, ठीक है। बट क्योंकि मुझे क्या करना है, एग्जामिनेशन करना है इसका, ठीक है। अब एक तो तरीका है कि मैं क्रिटिसिज्म को लिखूं एग्जामिनेशन में, ठीक है। लेकिन क्रिटिसिज्म क्योंकि मुझे ऑलरेडी लिखना है, तो इसलिए what I am doing, going to do limitation as a policy tool, I already have to write. So here I will not write that, Instead, what I am doing in examination, I am trying to show how the concept varies from person to person. ठीक है? So I am saying there is lack of consensus on what forms optimum population. ठीक है? So I am just using some of the geographical concept that I have learned. So lack of consensus Malthus के लिए optimum population. So optimum is a temporary situation as population grows geometrically and soon overtakes the arithmetic growth of resources or subsistence. ठीक है? So Malthus के मॉडल में we have seen already so this is the point of optimum where there is the balance between resource and population. Before that what is present? There is underpopulation and after that there is overpopulation. ठीक है? So this is the case of underpopulation. This is the case of overpopulation and this is your optimum population. So this is whose diagram? It is Malthusian diagram of how this is. Very clearly optimum population according to Malthus is what? It is temporary situation because soon what will be occurring? The population will outstrip or outgrow the resource available and it will convert into what? Overpopulation situation. It is inevitable according to Malthus. ठीक है? सो माल्थस के हिसाब से बता दिया. दूसरा इंपॉर्टेंट थिंकर कौन है? मार्क्स. ठीक है? सो मार्क्स के लिए ऑप्टिमम इज रियलाइजेबल ओनली अंडर कम्युनिज्म. हिज आइडिया इज व्हाट? इट इज पॉलिटिकल इकोनॉमी रिलेटेड. सो पॉपुलेशन सिचुएशंस वैरी विथ पॉलिटिकल इकोनॉमी. सो मार्क्स कहता है कि डिपेंडिंग अपॉन द सिचुएशन और डिपेंडिंग अपॉन द पॉलिटिकल इकोनॉमी पॉपुलेशन characteristics will be present. Capitalism may, because there is exploitation done by rich of the poor, so in that case optimum population will never be reached. Optimum population will be reached only in case of what? Communism. ठीक है? So मार्क्स के लिए अगर मुझे डायग्राम बनाना है, ये बाद में भी अभी मैं बनाऊंगा, जस्ट आई विल शो यू. दिस इज द हिस्टोरिकल मेटेरियलिज्म कंसेप्शन ऑफ मार्क्स. ठीक है? So Marx क्या कहता है? He studied the history of Europe and he came to certain conclusion. This was your traditional society. So this is your traditional society and here there existed a primitive communism. There existed a primitive communism. That means community was the controller of resources. That is communism. ठीक है? यहां पर हम बाद में देखेंगे कि यूरोप में a system was used which is referred to as feudalism. ठीक है? So why feudalism? Because they wanted to increase the productivity in agriculture and other things we'll talk about later. So with feudalism there was creation of two classes in the society. One was the class of feudal lords, the feudal landlords, and there was landless peasants. ठीक है? So there was rich feudal landlords and there was poor agricultural peasants over there. This is basically referred to as the system of feudalism. ठीक है? So can you understand feudalism कि आते ही क्या हुआ, सोसाइटी में इनइक्वालिटी आ गई, बिकॉज नाउ देर इज अनइक्वल डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन ऑफ रिसोर्सेज टेकिंग प्लेस. ठीक है. When there was stagnation in agricultural productivity, because you know any technology will work up to certain time, there will be marginal returns which will be there. Luckily at that time there was also technological revolution. It led to industrial revolution, and in this industrial revolution the people who were investors, who became capitalists, were none other than the feudal landlords. Okay. So there was essentially, this became capitalism. Okay. So in capitalism there are rich capitalists, handful of rich capitalists, and there is industrial laborers. So this is the rich capitalists and this is the industrial laborers. Can you see, according to Marx, this problem will continue to take place because the rich continues to exploit the poor. Until the time the poor is poor, they will be characterized by high birth rate, and this will lead to overpopulation. So you cannot solve the overpopulation in this kind of system. The only way to solve the system is what he talks about, that there will be a violent revolution. There will be a violent revolution, something like what happened in Russia with the czars. And once it is there, then there will be redistribution of resources in the society. Okay? There will be redistribution of the resources in the society, and this will lead to, बीच में ये पीरियड जिस होता है इसको हम बोलते हैं transition. There will be a transition phase where the society will transition from capitalism towards modern communism. The society will transition from capitalism towards modern communism. I can understand कि हो सकता है अभी तुमने मार्क्स पढ़ा नहीं है ढंग से तो समझ में नहीं आया, because I have taken the question, I'll explain there in detail. Here we are studying different concept. ठीक है. Just because we have to write one point, I am just giving you a diagram. So this is the basic idea of Marx कि communism के अंदर ही real optimum population can be achieved. Why? How it is? Because in communism, technology is playing a positive role. कैपिटलिज्म में टेक्नोलॉजी का रोल क्या था? इट वॉज यूज्ड एज अ टूल ऑफ एक्सप्लॉयटेशन. कैन वी से आज की डेट में एआई आ रहा है तो इज इट रिप्लेसिंग द जॉब्स? यस और नो? इट इज रिप्लेसिंग द लेबरर्स, सो इट इज एक्सप्लॉयटेशन. बट इन कम्युनिज्म टेक्नोलॉजी प्लेज अ मोर पॉजिटिव रोल. द रोल ऑफ द टेक्नोलॉजी इज टू एक्सपैंड द रिसोर्स बेस. इट कीप्स एक्सपैंडिंग द रिसोर्स बेस. एज अ रिजल्ट, availability of resources will never be problem. ठीक है. In communism, another thing that is taking place is redistribution of resources. Fair share of the resources is given to all, and if people become developed, will they become also educated? So it is assumed that such educated, aware people will themselves keep their numbers to optimum level. ठीक है. So in this manner what is happening, optimum population जब इस situation में पहुंच जाता है तो this is a situation of what? Optimum population. ठीक है. So that is basically the idea of Marx. As I said कि हो सकता है नहीं समझ में आया होगा, you don't worry, as we move on you'll understand, because Marx हम अलग से अभी बात करेंगे. Optimum is realizable only under communism, where technology expands the resource frontier and equitable distribution ensures responsible reproduction. ठीक है. So दो फैक्टर की वजह से कम्युनिज्म के अंदर ऑप्टिमम सिचुएशन अराइज हो रही है. टेक्नोलॉजी इज प्लेइंग अ पॉजिटिव रोल and second, redistribution of resources is leading to responsible reproduction by the people. Okay, so I am talking about that. Then I can also write about our third main theory. You know, all these theories are there in models and theories, अलग से mention है. तो जहां पर यूपीएससी ने कोई ऐसा क्वेश्चन दिया है, पॉपुलेशन थ्योरीज, ठीक है, लाइक 1995 में क्वेश्चन देखोगे, थ्योरीज ऑफ पॉपुलेशन कंट्रोल, तो इट हैज नॉट स्पेसिफाइड विच थ्योरीज टू राइट. ठीक है, in that case I will think from the perspective of three theories, because that is the main three theories that we are using. So demographic transition theory, optimum population is realized when in the fourth stage of demographic transition, when stable population हो जाता है, population is stabilized, is achieved and socio-economic development is maximized. ठीक है, we will see it is the age of high mass consumption. ठीक है, तो उस स्टेज में बेसिकली क्या होता है, पर कैपिटा इनकम बिकम्स हाईएस्ट. सो दैट इज द आइडिया ऑफ डीटीटी विथ रिस्पेक्ट टू द ऑप्टिमम पॉपुलेशन. अब ये तीनों लिख सकता था मैं. ठीक है, दिस इज द थिंग यार. देखो, ऑल दीज थ्योरीज, जितनी भी पॉपुलेशन थ्योरीज हम ये पढ़ते हैं, all of them are actually talking about overpopulation, underpopulation and optimum population. So when you are reading those theories, when the teachers are teaching those theories, they should be explaining that this is the condition of optimum population, this is the condition of overpopulation, this is the condition of underpopulation. ठीक है, ओके. सो ये तीनों चीजें मैंने यहां पर एज अ पार्ट ऑफ एग्जामिन जो मेरा था यहां पर लिख दिया. आई होप यू गेट दिस पॉइंट. ठीक है, अब मैं आता हूं किस पर, लिमिटेशन एज अ पॉलिसी टूल. सो नंबर ऑफ थिंग्स वी कैन राइट अबाउट. फर्स्ट हमने देखा है कि अगर हम देखें तो it has been treated as static, how it has been defined in theory, many of them. So assumes fixed resources and technology. Bosrup has showed innovation shifts the optimum upward. So optimum is not static, it is what, it keeps moving and adjust, the policy needs to be adjusted according to this movement. So here you can see this is one optimum, but if there is technological innovation, what will happen with the optimum? It will move upward. ठीक है, so it is not static, it keeps moving. So I can show that with a diagram. Operationally elusive. Robin, one of the very important proponents of optimum population, himself called it almost useless. The true optimum cannot be empirically pinpointed. Okay, you cannot pinpoint it in terms of numbers. Can I say while formulating policies you should have clarity with respect to certain numbers? Okay, so again that is missing. Third problem, it has welfare myopia. It is primarily looking at the welfare from the perspective of per capita income, standard of living. Can we say the idea of development or welfare today, has it moved away from that ideas? It has become more multi-dimensional. Today we are talking about happiness, today we are talking about freedom, today we are talking about quality of life. I hope you get this point. Okay, so when we are talking about optimum population, our idea of welfare, it is just limited to standard of living. Okay, so per capita income misses other aspects like health, environment and capabilities. Okay, it is also spatially blind. Okay, so again it is very frequent that areas will be called, or countries, entire countries would be called as optimum populated. Like अभी हमने बात किया तो हम पूरे states को classify कर दे रहे थे, whether it is underpopulated, overpopulated or optimum populated. Can we say that within the states also we will find intra-state disparities? Yes or no? So again that is the case of the spatial blind nature. Okay, so it aggregates over regional divergences. India's southern states are sub-replacement while northern are still growing. So it is different. Then there is ecological omissions. Okay, again you can understand today the policy, any population policy, should it take into account the idea of sustainability? Yes or no? It should be based upon the concept of sustainability, but it ignores the carrying capacity and planetary boundaries concept, because it is how it was formed. It was essentially what? It was economic concept. Okay, economic demographic concept. So you can see economic optimum can be different from the ecological optimum. Okay, very frequently in the policy we look at this economic optimum and forget about the ecological optimum. Okay, so that is there. And finally, one more problem that the world is seeing is now the binary has collapsed. What does this means? Two-thirds of the population of the world or countries of the world are characterized by fertility below replacement level. Two-thirds of the countries of the world, their fertilities have fallen below the replacement level. Okay. So under such scenario, there is like today, it is more about survival. Okay. How the societies will survive in future. Because if it continues, can I say today, okay, developing countries are supplying labor to the developed world. But can I say soon they will also face labor scarcity? Okay. Then what will happen? So now the question is no more of over under population, it becomes more of a survival based question. Okay. So here again what we have done, we have talked about how it is the policy tool. So again conclusion, a heuristic. यहाँ पर एक और पॉइंट क्योंकि उसके अगेंस्ट लिखना है तो यहाँ पे मैंने भी ऐड नहीं किया था, तीन ही पॉइंट थे मेरे भी. यहाँ पर मैं लिख सकता हूँ कि डिस्पाइट ऑल इट्स लिमिटेशंस are there certain strengths of the idea of optimum population with respect to policy tool or being a policy tool? क्या उसके कुछ strengths हैं? Tell me. क्योंकि हमें इसके अगेंस्ट लिखना है लिमिटेशन के. You have to examine the limitations को examine करना है, यानी कि उसके नेगेटिव का उल्टा क्या होता है? पॉजिटिव. So what we can write? Number of things. First, very important thing is that optimum population, if you talk about as a concept, it is simple concept. It is easy to understand. It is easy to understand. Also, since it is based upon per capita income, ठीक है? Per capita income or per capita real income, tell me, does it becomes helpful in comparative nature for comparisons? And are comparisons very important for the policies? Yes. ठीक है? So it allows comparison between regions and between countries. And can we say it is only through comparisons we can measure actual progress? ठीक है? So this helps in understanding the actual progress with respect to the policy or population policy. ठीक है? So there are some positives which we can definitely write. Main इसकी बात क्या है? ये simplified है and because it is measuring the per capita income, ये डाटा सब जगह अवेलेबल होता है, इसलिए कंपैरिजन क्या हो जाता है? इजी हो जाता है. ठीक है? एंड यू कैन ऑल्सो मेजर इजिली द प्रोग्रेस ऑफ द पॉपुलेशन पॉलिसीज ऑन द बेसिस ऑफ दैट. ठीक है? सो दैट इज समथिंग विच यू कैन राइट. फाइनली उसका एक कंक्लूजन दे रखा है मैंने. ओके, देन नेक्स्ट टॉपिक इज, सो दिस इज द कंसेप्ट ऑफ ओवर अंडर एंड ऑप्टिमम पॉपुलेशन. ठीक है? आई हैव ट्राइड माई बेस्ट टू लुक इट फ्रॉम ऑल द एंगल्स. मुझे लगता है कि जितने भी क्वेश्चंस होंगे घूम फिर करके सब इन्हीं से आएंगे. ठीक है? Questions wordings can be different. One thing I have taught you today is whenever you read the question, देखो स्कूल टाइम में एक एक्टिविटी हम करते थे लिटरेचर के अंदर. देयर यूज टू बी in our tests and exam, they used to give poems or certain phrases and we were used to write हिंदी में, like हिंदी में ये बहुत होता था कि उसका अर्थ और एसेंस लिखिए. ठीक है? So if you talk about, whenever you are reading the question, individual words, एक idea है, you might be aware कि when parts combine they can create a whole which might be bigger than the sum of these parts. ठीक है? So essentially try to understand that point कि अगर question है तो उसका कुछ essence हो सकता है. It might be containing important theme. And if you look back in the PYQs, UPSC के questions में this is very dominantly present. There is a theme. जो उस थीम को पहचान गया, particularly in the statement based questions, ठीक है, जो उस थीम को पहचान गया उसका काम आधा हो गया. ठीक है, so you have to identify those themes. Okay, then next topic पर आते हैं. Our next topic is the ones which are given in models and theories, Malthusian, Marxian and demographic transition models. ये topics आए या ना आए directly exam में, ठीक है, they are very very relevant because they have so much of indirect utility. Whatever we will be studying, those things can be used at so many places. ठीक है, तो इसको तो करना ही करना है. So Malthusian, you understand, Malthus का basic idea क्या था? That population growth is much faster than the resource growth, subsistence growth. ठीक है, and as a result what will happen? A crisis will emerge. He was very pessimistic, he was very deterministic in his attitude, and he believed that humans do not have the capacity to take care of this problem. And that is why when it came to preventive checks, he wrote that preventive checks will not be so much effective, that the positive checks will not apply. Positive checks will have to be, or they will apply, because preventive checks will never be so much effective. So you know what are the positive checks of Malthus? Natural calamities, wars, famines, all those are the positive checks which have been written by Malthus. And can you understand the use of the word positive check? उसी से पता चलता है कि बंदा कितना pessimistic था. ठीक है? So if you talk about, that is the basic idea of Malthusian theory. उसके लिए solution वही है. What is the solution? Natural. So Malthus की जो theory हम उसको दो part में पढ़ते हैं. First part में he is trying to explain the population resource nexus. ठीक है? And what is the outcome of that population resource nexus? According to him, it is always the situation of overpopulation. How this overpopulation is taken care finally, how that S becomes in that S curve, it is through application of positive checks. ठीक है? So for him the solutions is what? There is no other solution but positive checks. But we have to understand, जब माल्थस ने ये अपना essay लिखा 1798 में, ठीक है, we are talking about a society which was still at the early phase of modernism. ठीक है, there was still deeply religious sentiments. Malthus himself was a clergyman, you must understand this. This is one of the reasons he did not recommend the birth control measures like use of contraceptives. He was against them, because you know कि Christianity is also what? A universal religion. And universal religions क्या करना चाहते हैं? They want to spread their faith in the entire world. One way of spreading the faith is what? To have more number of children. One way of having more supporters is to have more number of children. That is why most of the universal religions, whether it is Christianity or Islam, they were always against what? They were always against such birth control measures. So in its earlier part, even Christianity was against that, which is reflected in the ideas of Malthus. Okay? 1798 he was talking about his theory. Can you understand? उस समय society would have been still, some religious aspect of the society would have been strong. So can I say बहुत सारे लोगों को बुरा लगा होगा माल्थस की बात. दूसरा एक aspect society का ये भी था कि society at that time was transitioning towards an industrial capitalistic society. ठीक है? So tell me, can I say in industrial capitalistic society, is there requirement of cheap labor? ठीक है? If people would have adhered to what Malthus was saying, the cheap labor wouldn't be available. So can we say there would have been several capitalists who wouldn't have liked what Malthus was saying, the warning that he was giving. So Malthus' ideas were severely criticized, particularly his use of the geometric progression and arithmetic progression, because that was the most weakest part of his theory, because there was no such empirical data or validity to suggest that this kind of relationship is there between population and resource growth. ठीक है, इसलिए माल्थस ने लेटर डेज में क्या किया, he didn't so much over stressed on those geometric and arithmetic progressions. उसने numbers के बारे में बात करना छोड़ दिया. In fact, in his later writings, he focused more on suggesting policy measures for population management. ठीक है, और इसीलिए अगर देखोगे तो मैंने एक क्वेश्चन और दे रखा है इसके अंदर, examine the influence of Malthusian views on development of population policies across the world. ठीक है, so beside his theory, Malthus has extensively written later on population policy. एंड देखेंगे कि पूरे वर्ल्ड में जो पॉपुलेशन पॉलिसीज हैं अभी, उसमें माल्थस का बहुत ही बड़ा योगदान है, वेरी स्ट्रॉन्ग इन्फ्लुएंस ऑफ माल्थस. ठीक है, सो अगेन फ्रॉम दैट पर्सपेक्टिव आई एम आस्किंग हियर टू क्वेश्चंस. ठीक है, पहला, इन एन एज ऑफ क्लाइमेट क्राइसिस, पैंडेमिक्स एंड फोर्स्ड माइग्रेशन, द वर्ल्ड सीम्स टू बी फेसिंग माल्थुसियन रेकनिंग, क्रिटिकली एग्जामिन. ठीक है, सो अभी हम इसकी बात करते हैं. माल्थस का जो ये आइडिया था, इट वाज गिवन व्हेन 1798. दिस आइडिया इन द 20th सेंचुरी, इनफैक्ट लेट 19th भी कह सकते हो, इट वाज अगेन रिवाइव्ड. ठीक है, बाय मेनी थिंकर्स, एंड दीज थिंकर्स फेमसली केम टू बी नोन एज नियो माल्थुसियन. ठीक है, सो माल्थुसियन और नियो माल्थुसियन जो है, they are similar, they have similar line of thinking. So neo-Malthusian are those, it can be called as a movement or it can be called as those scholars who adhere to the same idea of Malthus, that population's capacity to grow is much faster than the capacity of resources to grow. ठीक है, so all those who adhere to this idea are referred to as neo-Malthusians. ठीक है, अब इसमें मैंने एक मटेरियल जो दिया है, इसमें के अंदर मैंने यहाँ पर समझाया है व्हाट इज नियो माल्थुसियन. यू हैव टू रीड इट एट होम. सो नियो माल्थुसियन थ्योरी एक्सटेंड्स द थॉमस माल्थस आइडियाज ऑन पॉपुलेशन ग्रोथ एंड रिसोर्स स्कार्सिटी, incorporating modern concerns such as environmental degradation and sustainability. So they have also included little bit the role of technology, how the technology, what type of role it will play. So core concepts की पॉपुलेशन ग्रोथ के बारे में बात किया, रिसोर्स डिप्लेशन के बारे में बात किया, एनवायरमेंटल डिग्रेडेशन एंड सस्टेनेबिलिटी. ठीक है, अब इसमें देखो मैंने कुछ चीजें दी हैं जो बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है तुम्हारे लिए. सम ऑफ द नेम्स. ठीक है, सो लाइक फॉर एग्जांपल पॉल एरलिश, अ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट नियो माल्थुसियन थिंकर, टॉकिंग अबाउट व्हाट, द पॉपुलेशन बॉम्ब, प्रिडिक्टेड मास स्टार्वेशन एंड सोसाइटल कोलैप्स ड्यू टू overpopulation. ठीक है, then if you talk about Garrett Hardin, very famous tragedy of the commons, ठीक है, argued that individual self interest lead to the overuse of common resources. ठीक है, then Donella Meadows and Club of Rome will already, you know, it is already given in our syllabus, economic geography, limits to growth. So that is also what, it is a neo-Malthusian theory. Then others like Lester Brown, he has written in 2009 Plan B 4.0, mobilization to save civilization, advocated for comprehensive global efforts to stabilize population and manage resources sustainably. ठीक है, William Ophuls 2011 में he talks about what is the relationship between politics and resource. So what is the idea of Ophuls? He draws or he gives example of Africa and he says that in Africa there is rise of authoritarian regimes. ठीक है, and then he explains why it is happening, because according to him, in the past democracy has flourished because there was resource surplus. For democracy to flourish, what is required? Resource surplus is required. ठीक है, now in Africa population growth is taking place, because of that resource scarcity is developing, and that is the primary reason why there is authoritarian regime. So when there is resource scarcity, resources have to be better managed, and that requires certain kind of authoritarian regimes. Okay? So again, he is explaining this phenomena. So this is the neo-Malthusian thinkers. What is difference between Malthusian ideas and neo-Malthusian ideas? Number of them, like for example, एक idea दोनों के बीच का difference क्या है? It is related with the numbers के terms में. Malthus ने किसकी बात की? Arithmetic and geometric progression. They didn't use any such kind of numbers to explain it. Then if you talk about second differences with respect to resources, Malthus' idea was limited to what? Subsistence, food resources. They have expanded the conception of resources to include natural as well as or conventional and unconventional resources both. So they include energy, mineral, various other type of resources they are talking about. Okay? So that is difference between them. Then if you talk about another difference between them is with respect to how to solve the population problem. In this case, Malthus was highly environmental deterministic. He was very clear it is the positive checks which will solve the problem. And he was against the use of contraceptives. Okay? In case of the neo-Malthusians, they are in this regard, they are not, we cannot say they are possibilistic. ठीक है? Some, क्योंकि न्यू माल्थुसियन देखो, एक समझ लो इस पॉइंट को, कई बार हम रीड करते हैं तो हमें कंफ्यूजन होता है. क्यों कंफ्यूजन होता है? क्योंकि माल्थस के केस में एक बंदे ने थ्योरी दी, न्यू माल्थुसियन बहुत सारे लोग हैं, तो सबके अपने अपने व्यू होंगे. ठीक है? एक जनरल चीज हाउएवर वी कैन से दे आर एडरिंग टू माल्थुसियन आइडिया. ठीक है? तो इसलिए उनका जो विश्वास टेक्नोलॉजी में हम मानते हैं, दैट इज बेसिकली व्हाट इट इज, कंपैरेटिवली लोअर. ठीक है? बट देयर विल बी सम हु वुड से दैट technology should be developed and it can solve many of the problems. But overall, they advocate use of contraceptives to control the population. That means they have more faith in humans compared to Malthusian. Okay? So can we say they are more humanist than Malthusian theory? Okay? Neo-Malthusian are more humanist than the Malthusians. There is no doubt about it. ठीक है? और डिफरेंस दोनों में क्या है? वन डिफरेंस इज माल्थस हैज इम्प्लीकेटेड द पुअर क्लास एज द रूट ऑफ पॉपुलेशन प्रॉब्लम इम्प्लिसिटली. ठीक है? उसने इम्प्लिसिटली, उसने डायरेक्टली नहीं लिखा अपनी थ्योरी में कि पुअर क्लास इज रिस्पॉन्सिबल फॉर पॉपुलेशन ओवर ग्रोथ. ठीक है? हाउ ही हैज इम्प्लिसिटली रिटन, एक जगह पर वो लिखता है कि द लेबर क्लास शुड डेवलप द सेम डिसिप्लिन as the middle class. ठीक है? इसका क्या मतलब है? Which type of discipline? The demographic discipline. It was found that the middle class people at that time used to control their numbers, and the poor people, they used to have lots of children. ठीक है? So that shows that he was also of the view that poor class is the reason for overpopulation. ठीक है? But when it comes to the neo-Malthusians, they are explicit with respect to this idea that it is the poor who are responsible for overpopulation. They particularly talk about the developing countries being the responsible for global overpopulation. Okay? So they are very explicit, and that is why they say that when the developed countries are giving money or financial aid to the developing countries, they should always attach conditions that they will be controlling their population. Okay? Otherwise, money should not be given. Okay? Because they believe in the Malthusian principle. और Malthusian principle क्या कहता है? That there is a direct relationship between resource available and population growth. Resource बढ़ेगा तो population growth क्या हो जाएगा? और ज़्यादा बढ़ जाएगा. ठीक है? तो if you are giving money to them, what will happen? Population will be increasing many-fold than economic growth. So it will give more bigger problem. So they are implicating the developing countries. Can you understand? Many of the developing countries, they started to use fertility control policies. Okay? Declared fertility control policies. And again, it was under what? It was under these neo-Malthusian pressures. Okay? So दैट इज द बेसिक कंसेप्शन ऑफ द नियो माल्थुसियन। आगे बढ़ते हैं, अब क्वेश्चन पर आते हैं। इसमें सब लिखा हुआ है, यू कैन जस्ट गो थ्रू दैट, यू डोंट नीड टू रीड एनीथिंग एल्स फॉर दिस। ओके, so the question says, in the age of climate crisis, pandemics and forced migration, the world seemed to be facing a Malthusian reckoning. And here the secondary keyword is what? Critically examine. ठीक है? So again, I'll give you 2 minutes. Frame your answer. Okay. कैसे लिखेंगे इसको? बहुत सीधा सा आंसर था इसका. There is very clearly keywords which are given. Just is that you have to have a good understanding of what these things are. ठीक है, तभी हम उसको लिख पाएंगे. ये बिल्कुल सीधा सा क्वेश्चन है, आता है नहीं आता है वाला हिसाब किताब है इसमें. ओके, सो इन एन एज ऑफ क्लाइमेट क्राइसिस, पैंडमिक्स एंड फोर्स्ड माइग्रेशन, 3 एलिमेंट्स पे मुझे लिखना है. फ्रॉम 3 एंगल्स आई हैव टू राइट. ठीक है, फ्रॉम 3 एंगल्स व्हाट आई हैव टू राइट, whether they represent Malthusian reckoning. That means क्या Malthus सही है? Can I say I can alternatively frame this question? Can I say contemporary relevance of Malthus from the perspective of climate crisis, rising pandemics and forced migration? Can we say that? That is what the question is. It is just asking the contemporary relevance of Malthus from these 3 perspectives. ठीक है, अब जैसे ही मेरे दिमाग में मैंने क्वेश्चन का एसेंस पकड़ लिया, इट इज आस्किंग द कंटेम्पररी रेलेवेंस, जैसे ही मेरे दिमाग में ये कंटेम्पररी वर्ड आता है, कैन आई से कि मेरे दिमाग में तुरंत आता है न्यू माल्थुसियन. बिकॉज कंटेम्पररी टाइम्स में हु आर द पीपल हु आर एम्फसाइजिंग द आइडियाज ऑफ माल्थस? इट इज द न्यू माल्थुसियंस. ठीक है, so can I say that can be the beginning point of my answer? Yes or no? Will it make sense? Obviously yes. So अगर मैं इसमें introduction लिख रहा हूं, if I'm writing the introduction, so can I say in recent times neo Malthusian thinkers like Robert Kaplan और कौन से थे? So one was Kaplan we talked about. Others, एक तो फुल्स था. There was one more very important, Paul Ehrlich. This is a name which is very important. Etc. has or have emphasized that contemporary problems like climate change, rise of pandemics and forced migration are reflections of Malthusian positive checks. A reflection of Malthusian positive checks. ठीक है? So now this introduction is more to the point, tackles the question which is directly asked, relates, recent हमने बता दिया, उसमें कुछ thinkers के नाम भी आ गए, ठीक है? So it is a complete introduction which is like a kind of something which will impress the examiner, ठीक है? Then I'll come to the main body, ठीक है? So अब मेन बॉडी में इट इज वेरी क्लियर, क्योंकि क्वेश्चन में इट इज आस्किंग अबाउट थ्री थिंग्स. वन, इट इज आस्किंग अबाउट क्लाइमेट क्राइसिस एज अ पॉजिटिव चेक. वन थिंग इट इज आस्किंग. Second thing what it is asking, it is asking about rising pandemics as a positive check, ठीक है? So second thing is rising pandemics as a positive check, and third it is asking about forced migration as a forced migration, can we say it is a response to the positive checks, ठीक है? As a response to positive checks, ठीक है? अब ये जो क्वेश्चन था 15 मार्क्स का था. 15 मार्क्स का मतलब है 225 नंबर. सो ऑलमोस्ट मेरे पास 200 वर्ड्स हैं लिखने के लिए मेन बॉडी को, ठीक है? अब 200 वर्ड को मुझे 3 पार्ट्स में लिखना है वेरी क्लियरली. दैट मीन्स फॉर एवरी पार्ट अराउंड 65-70 वर्ड्स आई विल बी गेटिंग. यू अंडरस्टैंड द चैलेंज. दैट बिगर चैलेंज दैट यू विल बी फेसिंग इज नॉट that you will have scarcity of content. Bigger challenge will be how to write all the things in those limited amount of words, ठीक है? 60 to 70 words. अब एक और चीज देखो, की वर्ड यहां पर क्या था? इट वॉज क्रिटिकली एग्जामिन. यानी कि जो सारे पॉइंट्स लिखूंगा उसमें मुझे क्या लिखना है? क्रिटिक भी लिखना उसका. तो यानी वो 60-70 वर्ड्स के अंदर मुझे समझाना भी है और क्रिटिक भी लिखना है. बिग इशू, बिग प्रॉब्लम, ठीक है? क्रिटिक भी रिमेंबर, और आंसर अपने आप में पूरा हर डायमेंशन से कंप्लीट होना चाहिए, ठीक है? सो अगेन व्हेन आई एम टॉकिंग अबाउट क्रिटिक, वी हैव सीन आई इज इक्वल टू पैट. अगर मैं पी का क्रिटिसिज्म करूंगा तो मुझे ए एंड टी के बारे में लिखना होगा, ठीक है? सो हर पॉइंट के दो तो क्रिटिसिज्म बन जाएंगे. I hope you are getting how much big challenge it is to actually write in words, ठीक है? That is why I said if you have to practice writing these at home, कि क्या तुम उसको स्टिपुलेटेड वर्ड लिमिट में लिख पा रहे हो? क्या उसको स्टिपुलेटेड टाइम लिमिट में बिना देखे लिख पा रहे हो? That is a bigger challenge, ठीक है? So that is what we have to essentially do here. I hope it is clear. ठीक है, मैं फटाफट एक्सप्लेन कर देता हूं बिकॉज इट वॉज सिंपल, तो मैंने इसलिए पहले से ही लिख करके रखा था. क्लाइमेट शॉक्स एंड माल्थुसियन चेक्स. कैन यू अंडरस्टैंड सिंपल थिंग दैट देयर इज द क्लाइमेट, या फिर इसको एक्चुअली ये थोड़ा सा गलत डायग्राम आ गया, मैं इसका समझाता हूं हाउ इट इज. क्लाइमेट शॉक्स एंड द माल्थुसियन चेक, इसमें दो डायग्राम बना सकते हैं. वन विच इज देयर, इट इज ट्रू कि इफ देयर इज क्लाइमेट चेंज, जो अभी हमने पहले देखा रिसोर्स बेस कम होगा उसकी वजह से, एंड देयर विल बी शॉक्स टू पॉपुलेशन और पॉजिटिव चेक्स ऑन पॉपुलेशन. बट अनदर वे ऑफ अंडरस्टैंडिंग इज दिस वन. सो दिस इज द कैरिंग कैपेसिटी, तो यहां पर हम उसको चेंज कर देते हैं, ठीक है। एंड हाउ वी चेंज, it is the capacity of environment or atmosphere to recycle greenhouse gases, ठीक है। एटमॉस्फेयर की कैपेसिटी है, रिसाइकिल करने की इतना अमाउंट कर सकता है। यू नो एवरी कंपोनेंट ऑफ द एटमॉस्फेयर हैज अ रेसिडेंस टाइम, ठीक है। कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड का रेसिडेंस टाइम अलग है, मीथेन का रेसिडेंस टाइम अलग है। So that is basically what, that is the capacity that tells us about the capacity. So this is the capacity, and capacity is what, it is finite, ठीक है। So here is what, this is your greenhouse gas emission. अब कौन सा सिनारियो होगा, we don't know. We want this scenario through the Paris climate deal, but we are more moving towards the scenario 2 where there is hardly change taking place in our pattern, ठीक है। So this is what, this is the greenhouse gases, ठीक है। अगर मुझे इसका एग्जाम्पल लेना है, कैन आई ऑल्सो, इसमें मैं कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड एमिशंस की बात कर सकता हूं। सो इफ यू लुक एट द कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड एमिशंस बिफोर द इंडस्ट्रियल रिवोल्यूशन, ठीक है, कितना था बिफोर द इंडस्ट्रियल रिवोल्यूशन, दिस वाज अराउंड 280 ppm. So if I am talking about concentration of CO2, ठीक है, this is the beginning of industrial revolution, beginning of the industrial revolution, ठीक है। And here I can talk about that this is somewhere around, अगर इसको मैं मान लूं 400 ppm. So अभी कितना है CO2 concentration, 2015 में it was 410, ठीक है, it was 410 ppm. So suppose we are saying carrying capacity is at 400, so now we are overshooting that, and this is very clearly reflective in what, it is reflective in the contemporary global warming taking place, ठीक है। So this is the basic idea. This diagram is actually better diagram than what is I have placed there. This is more like वो previous वाले के लिए ज़्यादा better था, जो climate change से resource का relationship वाले के लिए, ठीक है। So that is neo Malthusian support के लिए मैं वो diagram draw कर सकता हूँ। Hardly I have scope to write anything, ठीक है। डायग्राम को मैं यहाँ पे ज़्यादा प्रेफरेंस दूंगा because I do not have too much of space to write. So if I have to say, I will describe that same thing, that global, according to Neo-Malthusian, global warming is outcome of what? Outcome of breach of the capacity of the atmosphere to recycle the greenhouse gases. It is as simple as that. So climate change intense, उससे droughts, floods, crop failures and threatening food security, all these things are taking place. Here some example, like in 2022 Horn of Africa famine affected 37 million due to failed rains. Indian farmers face climate induced yield stagnation because of the global warming which is taking place. Neo-Malthusian argue this validates Malthus' prediction of natural resource limits, ठीक है। अब उसका मुझे क्या करना है, criticism लिखना है. So again criticism will be twofold: technocentric criticism and the Marxian criticism or the political economic criticism. So technocentric cornucopian criticism क्या कहता है कि if you look at the climate crisis, ठीक है, it is not a crisis of climate, it is more of a crisis of technology according to them. So whenever such crisis happens, crisis is reflective that our technology is not fast developing. Okay, so if we are able to develop the technologies fast, like for example precision agriculture or adaptation to the climate change, so advances in the genetically modified crops, precision agriculture and irrigation expand the carrying capacity. So it will not be a problem, we will be able to take care of the climate change problem, it is not a shock. Okay, so again what will happen, Marxian क्या कह रहा है कि this is the problems that we are talking about, the neo Malthusians are talking about, it is not result of what climate change, it is result of what read or the distribution inequality. So the problem if arises, it will not be because just because of the shocks, the climate change, it will be more because of that we have created so much big inequality that there is a part of population who will not be have able to handle this change. Suppose you are very rich, okay, and suppose there is a cyclonic disturbance which has come and it has led to some destruction. There are two people, one is rich and one is poor. Who will be better able to cope with the problem? The rich one. Okay. So they are they are saying that because there is unequal distribution, we have kept large part of the population out of it. So there is what? There is a big issue. Okay. So that is what they are saying. Then second one, pandemics and Malthusian checks. So Malthusian idea is very simple. How these pandemics are coming? Why these pandemics are coming? Because there is overpopulation, over exploitation of the resources is taking place. As over exploitation of the resources occurs, what will happen? Can we say that we will press upon the resources more? We will come more frequently in contact with the wild, and in that case what will be happening? The chances of the passing of pathogens or zoonotic diseases will become what? Higher, and as a result there will be more and more rise of the pandemics. Okay, that means the human and wild interaction will be more because now the resources will be less, so we will be moving towards where natural areas also will press upon the natural areas also, and this is very clearly result of overpopulation for them. ठीक है, बट कैन आई से कि ठीक है ये आइडिया हो गया, बट इसका क्रिटिसिज्म हम लिख सकते हैं. नंबर वन, एक बहुत बड़ी प्रॉब्लम इस आइडिया में ये है कि इट इज ट्रीटिंग दैट लाइक अभी का कोविड और सम रिसेंट में साउथ ईस्ट एशिया में देयर हैव बीन सम एपिडेमिक्स like bird flu or swine flu, or if you talk about in Africa where fast population growth is taking place, there is the problem of Ebola. ठीक है. Now the issue is that if you look at human history, entire human history में there have been lots of such parasitic diseases, such epidemics, pandemics. ठीक है. In fact you might be aware जो हम लोगों का blood group होता है, ठीक है, it is actually outcome of our resistance, our ability or body's ability to resist such type of diseases. ठीक है, it is related with that. So इसीलिए you will be finding different races में certain common type of blood groups would be more prevalent. ठीक है. So it is not new. Technocentrics are saying that this was also happening when in the past. Like for example, when Spanish flu occurred, it was way back in 1918. At that time, the world was not overpopulated. Even if we accept your idea, ठीक है, 1918 में तो कोई overpopulation नहीं था. और when if you talk about the societies are in the first stage of demographic transition, ठीक है, you would have seen demographic transition का diagram, देखा है? In the demographic transition first stage, is the mortality behavior is like this? Yes or no? Why it is like this? Because during this period there is so many epidemics, famines, etc. are taking place, which is increasing the death rates. इस समय तो society is not in overpopulation stage. How you can say that? ठीक है. So what the technocentrics are saying that it is simply result of genetic mutations of viruses, bacteria and pathogens. Mutations are taking time, so they'll occur from time to time. Whenever such mutations will occur, new strains will appear, and because the human population will not be resistant to those new strains, again what can happen? Epidemics or pandemics can follow. So it is more science related rather than overpopulation related. Okay? It is more of a biological phenomena rather than demographic phenomena. I hope you get this point. So this is the basic criticism of them. Marxian criticism would be that because the overpopulation which you are implicating as the reason because of which poor or people are made to press upon forest resources or other resources, it is not a result of overpopulation, but it is a result of relative overpopulation caused by maldistribution of resources. Okay? So again they call it as related with the maldistribution of resources. So again it is given, उसमें लिखा हुआ है, देन माइग्रेशन एज अ माल्थुजियन चेक. इसके लिए देख सकते हो कि मैंने कैसा डायग्राम बनाया कि देयर इज अ पैंडेमिक इज स्ट्राइकिंग एंड बिकॉज ऑफ दैट व्हाट विल हैपन, डेथ रेट्स विल बी, पॉपुलेशन क्रैश आएगा बिकॉज द डेथ विल इंक्रीज. ठीक है, बट उसके बाद फिर से क्या होता है, फर्टिलिटी रीबाउंड आता है, बाद में हम पढ़ेंगे, देयर विल बी फर्टिलिटी रीबाउंड टेकिंग प्लेस. ठीक है, सो दिस इज द काइंड ऑफ डायग्राम दैट यू विल बी यूजिंग फॉर पैंडेमिक्स एंड माल्थुजियन चेक. माइग्रेशन की बात करें, माइग्रेशन एज ए रिस्पॉन्स टू माल्थुजियन चेक, कैन यू सी हियर, दिस इज द कैरिंग कैपेसिटी. सो जैसे ही पॉपुलेशन की ग्रोथ यहां तक पहुंची, व्हाट इज टेकिंग प्लेस, देयर इज माइग्रेशन, आउट माइग्रेशन टेकिंग प्लेस फ्रॉम सच एरिया टुवर्ड्स अ डेस्टिनेशन. ठीक है, वेयर इफ यू टॉक अबाउट देयर इज मोर रिसोर्सेस than the population. ठीक है, so I have tried to show this in a diagram that what will be the outcome. So migration is essentially what, it is a response to such reaching to that carrying capacity. और उसकी वजह से फिर क्या हो जाएगा, source region में the population will be becoming less than if you talk about the carrying capacity. So it is a way, out migration is what, it is a way of balancing the population. ठीक है, so that is what the neo Malthusian will be talking about. ठीक है, but can we say there are other ideas like technocentric say migration fosters remittances, labor mobility, innovation, boosting resilience rather than signaling collapse. ठीक है, similarly Marxian migration stems from unequal development and capitalist extraction, not from absolute scarcity. The same point that again they are talking. So this is how this answer should have been written. It will be, if you actually write it in the stipulated number of words, you will be finding very challenging to write it. That is why I said practice these same questions at home. ठीक है, so this is the case. आगे बढ़ते हैं. Question number 5. Examine the influence of Malthusian view on the development of population policy across the world. Policies across the world. So it is the examine the influence of Malthusian views on development of population policies across the world. I'll give you 2 minutes. Okay, so अब इस क्वेश्चन को देखूं तो एक तो एग्जामिन है. एग्जामिन में हमने क्या देखा था, 70-30, एंड वी आर टॉकिंग अबाउट इन्फ्लुएंस ऑफ माल्थुजियन व्यूज. इट इज नॉट जस्ट थ्योरी, वी आर टॉकिंग अबाउट माल्थुजियन व्यूज. व्यूज में थ्योरी भी आ गया और उसका लेटर राइटिंग्स भी आ गया. ठीक है, ऑन डेवलपमेंट ऑफ पॉपुलेशन पॉलिसीज अक्रॉस द वर्ल्ड. ठीक है, अब इसको समझते हैं. सो माल्थस इफ यू टॉक अबाउट, as I have told you, one, his theory has affected the thinking of the world, and second, if you talk about his later writings have also affected. So अगर मैं इस आंसर को लिख रहा हूं तो सबसे पहले मैं इसी चीज को बताऊंगा. I will be very direct to say that not only the Malthusian essay on principles of population 1798 has influenced population policies, but also his later writings. But also his later writings. ठीक है, तो मैंने बता दिया कि दो उसके राइटिंग्स के एस्पेक्ट है, एक तो उसकी थ्योरी हो गई और दूसरा लेटर राइटिंग्स. ठीक है. नाउ अब मेरे पास इस आंसर को लिखने के लिए फ्रेमवर्क क्या बना. देखने में टू थिंग, एक तो तरीका है कि आई टॉक अबाउट द थ्योरी हाउ इट हैज इन्फ्लुएंस्ड and how later writings have influenced. This is one framework which I can take. But second framework I can take is फर्स्ट वर्ल्ड में कैसे इफेक्ट किया पॉपुलेशन पॉलिसीज को, सेकेंड वर्ल्ड में या फिर डेवलप्ड वर्ल्ड में कैसे इफेक्ट किया, एंड डेवलपिंग वर्ल्ड में कैसे इफेक्ट किया. ठीक है. सो इफ आई टॉक अबाउट द मेन बॉडी, आई विल फर्दर एक और लाइन लिखूंगा and I'll say his ideas have influenced population policies in both developed and developing world. ठीक है. So his ideas have influenced population policies in both developed and developing countries. In both developed and developing countries, दोनों जगह पर उसका इफेक्ट हुआ है. सबसे पहले देखते हैं हाउ इट हैज अफेक्टेड द डेवलप्ड कंट्रीज. कैन आई से जो मैंने यहां पर लिखा है, हैव आई पेव्ड द वे फॉर क्रिएटिंग अ हेडिंग इन्फ्लुएंस ऑन ऑफ पॉपुलेशन पॉलिसीज ऑफ डेवलप्ड वर्ल्ड. ठीक है. सो आई कैन क्रिएट अ हेडिंग नाउ, दैट इज influence on population policies of developed world. Of developed world. So tell me, सबसे इंपॉर्टेंट यहां पर माल्थस की अगर हम थ्योरी की बात करें तो माल्थस क्या कहता है. माल्थस वाज वेरी क्लियर, particularly in his later writings, that state should not interfere in demographic matters. लिख लो इसको, his later writings की बात कर रहे हैं. ठीक है. One thing he says is that state should not interfere in demographic matters. Demographic matters. ठीक है. इसका मतलब क्या है, there is no need for any fertility policy. So it means that there is no need for fertility policy. In fact, what should be happening? Economic policy itself will take care of fertility. For him, the economic policy itself takes care of fertility. Itself takes care of fertility. So इस बात को समझ लो कि माल्थस was against welfare approach. ठीक है. He was against the welfare approach of the state. You understand what is welfare approach? where the state is giving lots of subsidies etc. to the poor, that is welfare approach. So he was against the welfare approach because what he was seeing, population growth was highest where? Among the poor class. Okay? And if you are giving more resources to the poor class, what will happen? According to him, population will also further grow. So for him, it was creating a big problem. How it was creating a big problem? When state was giving lots of subsidies to the poor class, the burden of child care, it was not on the individuals or the parents. The burden of child care was taken by the state. As a result, that burden was not felt by the parents. When state withdraws such kind of support, that burden falls on whom? The parents. And then the parents will realize that having more children is a problem. Okay? So he was against what? He was in favor of market based approach, market based economy, and opposed welfare measures, and opposed welfare measures. इसमें लिखो he believed, एक लाइन लिखो, he believed that in market economy, the economic burden of having children, falls entirely on parents, entirely on the parents. ठीक है, ब्रैकेट में लिख लो disincentive. It works as a disincentive, automatic disincentive. Full stop. On the other hand, in market economy, there are opportunities. There are opportunities of self-development, and freedom through acquiring of resources, So ब्रैकेट में लिख लो, it was what? Incentive. So tell me, अगर मेरे पास बहुत सारा assets आ गया, if I have earned lots of assets, can I say I'll become free? I can do anything what I want? So this in market economy, it behaves as what? It behaves as an incentive. ठीक है? So market economy में according to Malthus, there are inbuilt incentives and disincentives which will discourage population growth. So these automatically discourage population growth. Automatically discourage population growth. 10 मिनट कर सकता हूँ, ठीक है. These automatically they are discouraging population growth. Now it is very clear that both the first world and second world countries, they did not had any declared population control policy. They followed the Malthusian principle of population policy. So लिख लो, this idea was followed by the first world countries. Full stop. They adopted market-based economy, and did not had any declared declared fertility control policy. ठीक है, समझ में आ गया? तो फर्स्ट वर्ल्ड में इस तरह से इन्फ्लुएंस हुआ है, बट क्वेश्चन क्या था, एग्जामिन, तो मुझे उसका शॉर्टकमिंग्स भी बताना पड़ेगा. You have to understand कि although they used the Malthusian idea, but it was not in absolute sense. These countries also developed welfare measures like social security measures. Those social security measures have played very dominant role in determining the reduction of fertility in these countries. You know, automatically in countries where fertility came down by the इंटर वॉर पीरियड, सेकेंड वर्ल्ड वॉर तक सबने अपना डेमोग्राफिक ट्रांजिशन कंप्लीट कर लिया था. ठीक है, सो वेरी क्लियरली वी फाइंड दैट इट वाज नॉट जस्ट बिकॉज ऑफ फॉलोइंग द आइडियाज ऑफ माल्थस, अदर थिंग्स ऑल्सो वर डन. वन इंपॉर्टेंट वॉज द सोशल सिक्योरिटी नेट. सो लिख लो इसको, वी आर टॉकिंग अबाउट द क्रिटिकल पॉइंट. Even in the first world, Malthusian ideas were not implemented in absolute sense. Absolute sense. Full stop. For example, most of the developed countries developed or created strong social security network. Strong social security network. ब्रैकेट में लिख लो, स्ट्रॉन्ग सोशल सिक्योरिटी नेटवर्क क्या है? अगर स्टेट बहुत सारा पैसा खर्च कर रहा है ऑन ओल्ड एज होम्स को मेंटेन करना, या फिर इफ यू टॉक अबाउट गिविंग द अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट अलाउंसेस, कैन आई से इट इज ऑल सब्सिडी वेलफेयर मेजर्स. ठीक है, सो ब्रैकेट में लिख लो वेलफेयर मेजर्स. फुल स्टॉप. इट इज बिलीव्ड दैट दिस सोशल सिक्योरिटी network played a dominant role in decline of fertility in the West. In decline of the fertility in the West. ठीक है, सो यहां पर हम ये लिख सकते हैं, एक और लास्ट लाइन क्या लिख सकते हैं? कैन वी से दैट टुडे द सिचुएशन हैज टोटली ऑल्टर्ड. नाउ दीज कंट्रीज हैव अडॉप्टेड अगेन फुल्ली वेलफेयर मेजर्स फॉर प्रोनटाल fertility policies. ठीक है, सो इन कंटेम्पररी टाइम्स sub replacement levels of fertility has forced the first world countries to adopt welfare based pro-natal fertility policies. वेलफेयर बेस्ड प्रो-natal का मतलब इन फेवर ऑफ फर्टिलिटी, टू इंक्रीज फर्टिलिटी. ठीक है, सो अगेन इट इज अगेंस्ट द आइडियाज ऑफ माल्थस. सो दैट इज व्हाट हैज हैपेंड इन द फर्स्ट वर्ल्ड. विल स्टॉप फॉर टुडे, इसको कल कंटिन्यू करेंगे बिकॉज वी हैव टू टॉक अबाउट व्हाट हैपेंड इन द सेकेंड वर्ल्ड कंट्रीज and what happened in the third world country. So we will be talking about that. ठीक है, अभी there is another class here, so there is not enough time. I also have another class at 3 p.m. ठीक है, so कल मिलते हैं. Hopefully you enjoyed the lecture. This will be the entire 500 plus from बिगिनिंग टू एंड इसी तरह से 500 प्लस चलता है, फालतू की बातें नहीं होती है। आज पहली क्लास थी इसलिए फालतू की बातें काफ़ी हुई, फालतू नहीं था मतलब वो ज़रूरी भी था टू ओरिएंट थिंग्स, बट बिकॉज इट वॉज अ फर्स्ट क्लास आई वॉज एक्सपेक्टिंग कि मे बी विल बी एबल टू कंप्लीट 6 to 7 क्वेश्चन। मैंने 7 क्वेश्चन का टारगेट बनाया था। आई थिंक अभी हम 4th या 5th पे ही हैं, सो वी आर लिटिल बिट बिलो बिफोर और लिटिल बिट लेट, बट विल कवर अप, डोंट वरी। ठीक है, सो विल स्टॉप फॉर टुडे। गुड बाय, टेक केयर।